colleagues, dear guests, dear friends. I'm happy to welcome you in Peter the Great, in Peter the Great Museum of Anthropology and Ethnography, Kunstkamera, Russian Academy of Sciences, and I'm happy to announce the opening of our international research seminar, Art, Science and Community-Led Practices to Tackle Environmental Decay, as a part of the exhibition project by Nabil Ali, Echoes of the Sea, Navigating Through the Changes of Nature and Cultures. Today our seminar is divided into 3 sections, and the first one is called Reflecting Climate Crisis in Art Practices, and this section will discuss the problem of climate change in art perspective. The second one, global and local dimensions of climate change, that will focus on environmental, ecological and geological issues and studies. And the last one, decolonizing history and indigenous knowledge, will offer us the anthropological views and studies of these problematics. Our presentations are scheduled. Timing for each paper and presentation is 15 minutes, and after each section we will have time for discussion. And during the discussion you can share your opinion, you can offer your suggestions, and you can ask questions to presenters. And now, firstly, before we start the seminar, I want to invite here representatives of each side of our partnership: Peter the Great Museum of Anthropology and Ethnography, Kunstkamera, Essex Cultural Development Project, and the creator of the project Echo of the Sea. So now we are welcoming Vladimir Davydov, Deputy Director for Research of Peter the Great Museum of Anthropology and Ethnography, Kunstkamera.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, I'm very happy that you are here in this library, in the oldest Russian museum, in Kunstkamera, and we participated in a very interesting project, and this seminar would be the result of our collaboration. And this is very important in the changing world because there are different kind of changes: economic crisis, pandemic, different movements of people, and everything is in change, weather, climate. And we are starting the dialogue. This would be interdisciplinary seminar, which involves not only scientists, but also different kind of specialists, artists, sculptors. And I think it's very important for us to speak together, and here we can share our opinion, to speak and maybe invent new ideas, and this would be, I hope this will be a very fruitful discussion, and we can create very important synthesis for the salvation of all these problems. And this discussion is very important in our time, and I mean that science should involve these views of artists, this bright, colored views, and it's very emotional. And this is, I think, the most important point here. And I'm very happy that all the parts of this project came to St. Petersburg in this difficult time, and Nabil Ali came to our city, and India as a director of cultural diversity at Essex Center. And I will give the microphone to Indy.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Now we're welcoming Indy Sando, Creative Director of Essex Cultural Development Project.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Essex Cultural Diversity Project, we are very obliged and humble that you have invited us to St. Petersburg on behalf of this project. And our organisation, the Essex Cultural Diversity Project, promotes cultural diversity in the arts and heritage sector. We work locally, nationally and internationally with a range of partners through collaborations and partnerships. We have worked with Essex-based artist Nabil Ali over the years, and we have commissioned him for the Sea People part of the Beach Streams project, which was taking place last year in Essex. The project was very well received, and in which then led to the project here, the Echo of the Sea here in St. Petersburg. All credit goes to Nabil for his outstanding work and forging these partnerships here in St. Petersburg with a range of partners and individuals. His hard work and dedication has managed to deliver this project and demonstrates how the arts can support awareness around environmental, sustainability, climate change and other issues. When Nabil approached me last year and asked me if Essex Cultural Diversity could actually support him in this project, we saw this opportunity and how this project can further develop his artistic development and also his international working. So we hope we can further develop strong partnerships with our Russian partners, arts practitioners, creatives, cultural and heritage organizations over the next few years, and through cultural exchanges, residencies, exhibitions and events. Thank you for hosting us today and this wonderful venue, and your hospitality is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Indy. And now we are welcoming Anna. No, you can speak here. We are welcoming Anna Bitkina, a creator of the project Echo of the Sea and co-founder of organization TALK.
Hello, everyone, and I'm really happy to be part of this. People of secret society, as Yelena Sobolyeva said, while guiding us through the wonderful exposition of Kunstkamera, which really present very rich examples of material culture of indigenous people that do not see themselves living outside or without connection to nature. I would probably take on what Vladimir said about this really interesting blend of expertise that we're going to hear and present during our seminar, and which I guess we composed together in order to, first of all, exchange our knowledge, but also to stimulate our political and ecological imagination, to think outside of maybe established patterns. And I hope that we also come up with some interesting cases from our disciplines which will lead us for this stimulation of our imagination and possibly implementation in reality. I really hope that we will extend our vocabulary while thinking about changes of nature, changes of climate, because the process is very nuanced and very complex, especially in this very technologized, complex society we're living in. And I hope that that will be fruitful for everyone and for those who are with us here and also who is joining us online. I also would like to guide you a little bit through the booklet, which can be composed for the seminar. And it's mainly based on the research which Nabil Ali was conducting during his time and resident of Kunstkamera, really. I would say the institution, which has amazing collection, but rather virgin to contemporary art practices. So I would say that Nabil is one of those few people that managed to penetrate this treasure. And during his presentation, we will hear more about his method and the result. And if you go through the curatorial text, I hope it will be helpful for you to understand better the relation between some artifacts of collection of Kunstkamera and how they presented or incorporated into the project of Nabil. But also, I hope that we managed to create some links to the wider content of Kunstkamera's collection, which consists of different ethnological exposition, but ethnographical and archaeological as well, but also dive into the history of science and history of thoughts, and bring us back to the universal approach to science and cross-disciplinary or multidisciplinary approach to reality. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to our talks and to the day.
Thank you, Anna. And now I would like to invite our first presenter. So I think it's better to have our presenters here, yes, in front of the laptop, to broadcast well to Zoom translations, because today we have listeners and participants in Zoom and in live streaming in YouTube channel of Kunstkamera. So we have a lot of distance participants and auditory, and I would like to invite here Nabil Ali, lead artist of Echoes of the Sea exhibition, Essex Cultural Development Project Manager, with presentation, Natural Materials, Connecting to the Environment Through Art. Welcome.
Good. Hello everyone, my name is Nabil Ali. I'm an artist from Essex in England, and it's a great pleasure to be here at one of the world's profound museums, Kunstkamera. And the host, I'd like to thank Vladimir, thank you very much for inviting me to St. Petersburg in Russia. Thank you to Indy for supporting me as well. Anna, thank you very much for your support, and likewise everybody else. I'm going to start off with my my initial thoughts on natural materials. I'm a specialist in pigments and the materialities of the work, and this one's connected to the environment through art. So I'm going to start from our previous project, The Sea People. As a message of coastal erosion. This is commissioned, as Indy's already mentioned, by Essex Cultural Diversity Project, and it's in partnership with Kinetic Designs as well. This was site-specific, and this was an experimental piece that led on to bigger things of understanding the environmental issues that's on our doorstep. This just happens to be coastal erosion. So, from the UK, the North Sea, through to the Baltic Sea, its neighbour. Then it goes up to the Gulf of Finland, on the doorstep on St. Petersburg, where we are today. This is the journey so far. We're working with seas, not the land, the seas. So, from UK to Russia, I'm going to explain to you Echoes of the Sea, what it's all been about, but mainly the materials used in the processes. So I'm going to take you on a journey behind the scenes. Okay? So why use natural materials via creative art practices? Why do it? Okay, many people say, well, can't you go to the shop and buy your own materials? Why do you need to go out into nature and collect your own sources. And I'm going to explain why. Utilising natural materials via creative art practice impacts how we perceive and interact with our surroundings. It forms a greater appreciation and more profound understanding of the materials used by encountering ancient processes in a contemporary way from hidden knowledge once related to nature. So we're rekindling something that's pretty gone. We're connecting with things that have been forgotten. Nothing's new. We've all established that in the world. We're just reassociating ourselves with what we already know deep down. So material, culture and creativity, a journey through the process. I'm going to start off with red ochre. It's a pigment, an earth pigment. On some of the artefacts in the museum, they're painted with red ochre. This is the link. It's the material link. This particular shaman's mask from North America can link to the Maori culture through the pigmentation. And through this process that I've used on this particular project, red ochre is mixed with wax, and this is locally sourced wax. It's not brought off the internet. We've actually gone to the sources around St. Petersburg, and they've supplied 45 kilograms of wax for this project. And that's called encaustic wax technique, 2,000-year-old technique from ancient Greece, which led in, they used it in Rome, Egyptian Rome, and then it led on to icon paintings from the 5th century. So there is a linear journey through this technique. So famous art Kandinsky, he used this technique, a few other artists as well. But red ochre is very important because of the fact that it's one of the oldest pigments used through human civilization. And they've been using it for the last 200,000 years. So with red ochre, I've used this particular inspiration from the Eskimo collection. It's just a simple connection with the mask. And with a fragment image of one of the sculptures, we've recreated a stylized version, the concept of the mask, or covering our faces. And also the blue clay, the indigenous to Russia, and that's mixed using the wax clay as well. Originally it's blue, but obviously the wax is yellow. Basic colour theory, add blue to yellow, turns green. And also, with my background, I do venture into alchemy. I do understand the concepts of basic chemistry through art, because once upon a time, science and art were connected together. They were not two separate entities. So with this particular process, exposing copper to vinegar vapour, it can produce a wonderful turquoise colour. On some of the statues, if you have a look around, if they're greenish colour, that means they're either mixed with bronze, copper, or bronze and tin to produce verdigris if it reacts with the sea air. Okay. So over time, the face of this sculpture will turn green. Again, it's been used in 13th century BC on papyrus, so it's a very ancient colour process. Everyone can do it. This is school experiments. It's not difficult to do. So in this process, you add it to vinegar. You seal it within a container. The vapours over a couple of weeks reacts with the copper and turns it green, and then you can use it as a pigmentation. So if we continue on, this particular conceptual art is called Greek Green. It's a 2008 financial affair, and it's corroding. The antique copper coins are corroding. It's a metaphor of coins corroding, corrosion from the financial affair. It's used in a process that's a few thousand years old. Again, with this copper technique I've used on this particular sculpture, this one was displayed and still is in Lisbon, in Portugal, where you've got verdigris, copper and gold leaf. And this particular shape, this is where I'm connecting with other particular artifacts, I've used the Gosselin manuscript, which is 15th century. So I've used the leaf shape. This is a model book, an ABC model guide to produce a leaf, which is an acanthus leaf. On the Roman columns, you have the leaves on top of the capital. It's acanthus. But this particular manuscript, I've simplified it by using 3 different shapes. And from those shapes, I've created a repetition into a 3-dimensional object. And as you can see, they're very mechanically natural. And this was a residency in Essex when I was working with the Gosselin manuscript and the other museums as well. So with my practice, I use the material context. Why it's important is natural. It's linking with the natural world. These are the things that people forget. And some of these plants will no longer be there in the future because of climate change. So we have to think about how we're actually going to preserve some of the work and also some of the processes that's been developed through research and experimentation. But this particular plant is rue, so if I show you the process, crushing the rue to get the juice, then from the vergery that you know how it's made, you add them together to produce a bottle green. It's a very famous bottle green in manuscripts. And this recipe is 14th century. Okay. For other plants, you've got Coreopsis, which you can produce a beautiful dye, and this is Indian silk that's been dyed with that particular plant. But it's a connection between the plant and object. Okay, if you go back one, if you click onto, that's it, database, plant database. So this is my organic research archive. So if you click onto it, it just gives you colours from plants. This is the research. This is deeper research. So you've got a list of plants that produce red. Let's just click next. Plants produce by yellow, blue, green, and purple. Okay. If you continue a couple, keep going. And each page, each research page links up to the process and the recipes and the ingredients used. So it's an informative database, but using plants. But this particular plant, I really want to talk to you about this particular plant because it's called weld, and it's a weed that grows everywhere, and it's processed in the dye. So it's a very, very basic process and technique that comes from the 1st century BC, and that's Roman technology. From the 10 books of architecture, that was the blueprint of Roman form. And they have a section on plant pigments, and this is one of the sections. Oh, okay. So we continue. So with the dye, I found a brick. This is another artwork that's painted with weld dye, but process is the same process using easel painting techniques from the 15th, 16th century. But this one's called Dismantling the Wall of Differences. So if any world countries have differences with others, dismantling the wall of differences is the way forward. There is no borders. So I just want to quickly talk about Mikhail Lomonosov, the famous scientist from this particular museum, and also Russia's first main scientist, the father figure of science in this country. He's a poet who glances out from the museum's portrait with echoes of his discussions of formations of icebergs in the North Sea and various voyages, only to see that the glaciers no longer exist, mere reflections in the glass of time. They no longer exist. The icebergs have already melted. So if he looked back as he is now, to now, he would not recognise what he was looking at then. So it's time, 4th dimension. So if we continue. Smolt, again, he used glass techniques with his experiments to do with mosaics that he is inspired by Italian Renaissance. Is it okay if I do this? I might be a bit quicker. And also you can see examples of Peter the Great mosaic, which is here in the museum. And I use the same process of smolt using glass pigment mixed with wax. So I'm using the concept of blue, introducing it to the sculptures, which you can see here, there's fragments of them. And this is symbolic to Lomonosov. It's not his experiments, it's symbolic. So it's a reference. Again, yellow ochre was being used, similar to red ochre, mixing it with hot wax. And I'd just like to give some studio acknowledgements to the Baltic Vine Limited, who supplied the frames for this particular project. The collaborative artists, the Russian artists Alicia Merlina and Vitaly Dachenko, excellent workers. They've worked really, really hard on this particular project. There's me in the studio working on one of the projects on Echoes of the Sea, and there's 15 topics concerning climate change. 15 sculptures, each has its own topic. And there's some audio text that's kindly supplied and created by Angelina Davidova. Thank you very much for doing that. And this is the community, this is the sculpture, these are the sculptures. They work as a group, as a family. And it's studio work, but they will be, the exhibition will be open in Cableport, hopefully on the 18th of February, which is next Friday. And it's Echoes of the Sea, next to the sea, on what we know about the sea and how it's changing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nabil. We hope to see all our participants from the seminar on the opening of the exhibition. And the next presentation is by Simon Perrotin. Simon Perrotin, sculpture artist. He has sent us his presentation. And it is called Resistance is Fertile.
Early on in my practice, I've employed images of resistance and conflict, as well as imagery from the natural world. And these images are often combined with concepts of beauty and decoration. For this short presentation as part of Echoes of the Sea, I want to highlight some key themes in my work, particularly how recycling and transformation have informed its development, not only materially, but also conceptually, and how this might position our understanding of art within the natural world. When searching for the ideal materials to fabricate early works, I often chose the discarded rubbish scattered about my studio floor. Cheap and readily available materials, such as a paper bag, scraps of cardboard, wood or paper, were fashioned into simple works held together with safety pins, bits of chain or glue. The idea was to make something quickly and easily, challenging some of the punk aesthetic I'd enjoyed as a teenager growing up in 1970s England. This was an exciting era where experimentation and mistakes were all part of the energetic and constant resifting of previous styles. Often things happened by accident, such as the painted doily that fell face down onto a sheet of perspex and sat there for weeks before I noticed it. This actually turned out to be a revelation and led to a whole body of cut paperwork that lasted years. The idea perfectly encapsulating something beautiful, crafted with a lot of time and care, but essentially pointless or worthless. These early paper pieces, I often refer to as romantic images of nature, but they also form my ideas of the natural world as a political space. The doilies were fragile, delicate screens, partially obscuring and revealing our view. Decorative interfaces between ourselves and the wider world. Some of these works reference the pagan imagery of the green man myth, symbols of growth and rebirth. On the one hand, a sense of ourselves being observed, also linked with anti-authoritarian folkloric such as Robin Hood. An intricate design by the socialist designer from the anarchy. Art features cycled images choreographed into a Berkeley dance routine. This simple repetition of forms to produce complex results also applied itself to more sculptural simple geometric forms. And these can become more elaborate, leading to the formation of some beautifully intricate structures. These stars or barges, like the doilies before, were equally fragile and delicate, floating and turning in space. I gradually built up a substantial personal archive of discarded stencils and cutouts, and these too sat piled up around the studio. And I began to work with them to create collaged and layered images by spraying through the stencils directly glass, another fragile material. Creating new meanings and imagery from old work and what was left over on the studio floor, strange fictitious portraits evolved, where fragments of natural forms combined with sinister silhouettes. Whereas the paper cutouts had been sharp-edged and graphic, these new glass paintings were more mysterious, often with softer, blurred lines. The end results were uncanny jumbles of imagery captured within the confines of a tight silhouette. The twisted, discarded debris from the ocean floor washed ashore, covered in thick black tar. organic matter bound up with human junk, thrown into the sea, pulls its way back up from the beach and invades the politeness of the clean, white-walled museum space before dripping down to the floors below. Here, similar themes were used in a permanent commission for a local government building situated on a swathe of recently reclaimed land. The idea was to use images of historical local flora, repeated into a decorative pattern, to collapse our understanding of the new interior and exterior spaces by showing what had existed on the site before. More ambitious projects, such as this on a stretch of the Old Canal in West London, are much larger collaborations and often involve working with large teams of partners. As a result, I often find that they require the artist to develop new negotiating skills and can lead to a more democratic approach into the art-making process. This was an urban regeneration project for an outer London area. The idea was to draw people along the canal and encourage better use and appreciation of the area. These vast disused structures, all that remained of a once vibrant industry that would have connected communities from across the country. By recladding and repurposing the shed structure, wrapping an artwork around the whole building, we were able to open up an enormous pavilion space on the water that was then used for film screenings and other community events. Waddesdon Manor was built by Baron Rothschild in the late 19th century to display his collection of arts and antiquities. The manor is built in a neo-Renaissance style that copied features from several French chateaux. Waddesdon's famous three-dimensional bedding was pioneered by Alice Rothschild in the first decade of the 20th century, and I thought it might be interesting to play with this idea for the parterre. Using carefully chosen succulents and other bedding plants set in a peat-free compost, two large outdoor sculptures were made that connected to the internal irrigation system used to water the wider formal gardens. This created sculptures that literally grew over time. As part of another, larger inner-city regeneration project, I worked with children from a local primary school. Together we explored the surrounding area and developed drawings, paintings and collages that revealed the history of the site. The idea was to produce a giant 40-metre hoarding which lined the construction site. The area is near the river and has a history of working watermills and industries such as iron or copperwork and fabric dyeing, but was also famous for the osier willows that grew on the riverbanks. These were historically used for basket making and for making the eel traps to harvest the eels that swam in the river. The osiers also helped protect the riverbanks from erosion. The engagement with the local community was vital to the project's success and is essential when working in the public realm. And the hoarding that the children I created will eventually return to line the walls of their school playground. As a result of working with the children at Brandwell House School, I returned to working with collage. Over the last 18 months it has been difficult to get to the studio, so I worked on small collages at home. Recently I've been able to develop these ideas further and have been working on a series of larger collages shown here. Over time my ideas of conflict and recycling have merged, so natural forms are now the catalysts for larger public artworks and sculptures. The final element of the osier project developed with the children will be a large osier willow leaf placed within the public realm on the site. The idea is that this artwork will be cut from weathering steel, a material with links to the area's industrial history, and fabricated using modern water technology. The children hope the leaf will welcome people to their newly regenerated home and remind them of the natural environment's connections with the past. This leaf links back to an ongoing series of outdoor sculptures I've been making recently, but also reference themes of growth and renewal that I spoke about earlier. In one sense, these works are about our actions as witnessed by the natural world. They observe us whilst acting as an interface between ourselves and the natural environment and our relationship with it. By engaging with local communities as part of these larger public art projects, my hope is that the two inform each other, leading to a better public art, which in turn feeds back into my studio practice.
We are grateful for Simon Purton, who sent us his presentation. And now the next presenter, we welcome here Anna Bit, the creator of the project Echo of the Sea and the co-founder of organization Talk. And Anna will present a paper, New Rights and Memory of Nature. Presentation.
Well, I'll just want to make my humble contribution to this presented cases or practices of two artists, Simon Purton and Nabil Ali. So I'd like to present three cases. Hopefully it will be, I hope it will contribute to the scholarship of artists that work with the preoccupied with concerned about conditions of our socio-political and ecological reality in their practices. Unfortunately, we're very limited in time, so it's almost a crime to present so swiftly their practices to which they dedicate years. So I hope if they see me now, they'll forgive me. So I'll try to connect three practices, quite different, but very similar to me in terms of their intentions. So the first one is a British artist and researcher. Oh, no, this, it's important to also mention that I built up my short presentation on the content of the symposium, which my organization Talk conducted in 2020 in collaboration with Arctic Art Institute. It's dear colleagues that are based in Arkhangelsk, and they have a very amazing artistic art forum that is very much focused on bringing awareness about unique northern cultures and local Nordic northern content. So yeah, first two artists, they being contributed for this symposium, and so it's I'm inspired by that, and I would like to share it with you. And I also welcome you to have a look at the archive of the symposium. If you're interested in the intersect of political history, artistic practice, and social science in relation to Arctic Circle and Arctic as a very peripheral but very planetary important region, I'll direct you to our YouTube channel and have a look at these presentations. So the first artist I want to focus on her particular project is Susan Shupley. She's a researcher and an artist based in the UK, in London. She's a professor of Goldsmiths University, and for the last few years, she's quite deeply concerned about politics of cold, which evolves in her project, very multi-layered project called Learning from Eyes, which compose knowledge around eyes, from scientific research to traditional cultures, indigenous cultures, and local understanding of eyes. Next slide. Yeah, so she's, so this is like I wasn't sure if we can show video, so I just make a compilation of stills from the film, which called Ice Core. And it's a documentary that's sort of one of the part of Learning from Ice project, and that exploring the politics of cold and focus on sort of taking us into inside of the Canadian Ice Core archive, which contains 10,000 years old pieces of ice, which in length is about 1.5 kilometers. So they're all indicated with labels, and they're all sitting in shelves next to each other. And scientists that work there, they work in like very particular conditions in a very, very cold environment. They study them. So ice, in this case, is a material witness of changing ecological condition. So it's an archive of our planet. And ice is also a very unique, in a way, construct, because it contains, it's kind of working as a capture for gas, for those bubbles of gas that are very important and interesting for scientists to research the quality of air, how it's changing over centuries. So that's, in a way, you can just go ahead with this slide. So this is how, in a way, like, so she's in this film, she's also showing how they work with ice, how they capture it, how they study it. And yeah, so that's, so maybe one slide further. Yeah, and then, like, you know, being an artist embedded for a while into community of those scientists, she's also learning about their conditions. Like, for instance, since 2011, they have a huge cut in their fundings. So basically, there is a shortage of people, and basically this ice, but also like, you know, it costs lots of money to maintain this archive into particular temperature conditions. So this is also, the funding is reduced. So basically, this is a very unique archive, which is evidence of climate, global warming is also melting. So that's kind of irony of that. So so her next project is so Cold Case, which she's developing together with Forensic Architecture in London. So this is an upcoming project, but the website is already on. So it's a compilation of cases that she composed together under the umbrella of Learning from Ice. And so each case is examined from different point of view, the thermostatic conditions. But also, she's very much concerned about legal questions and human rights and violation and rights for cold, especially for people that live in up north and very much depend on changing climate conditions, because like their life inseparable from nature, therefore very much affected by these changes. And I think Sophia will tell about that in details later. And so what is also important for Susan in her practice is pin down the very undeveloped legislative system that is absolutely not having any structure in order to protect rights and bring accountability for environmental crime. So it's so untangible, it is so somehow capitalistic in a way, or neoliberalistic in a way, that it's very difficult to find who is responsible, accountable for this. Therefore, so this question should be brought more and more into public discourse and sort of to widen awareness of people about that. And she's also, so this is just a case, it's not seeing well, but anyway, so if you're interested, you look further for that. And she's also sort of working to with the image of melting ice, and also image of Arctic, which could be seen as a very peaceful, beautiful scenery. But for her, it's very important to unnaturalize this image in order to stimulate some sort of spatial literacy, to see what is behind this ice, what kind of processes, political processes are happening in the region. And so she's also looking for artistic visual language to do this. And there is a, like, next still is some sort of a leading image of that, it's, I don't know, it's a little bit crooked, my presentation, but the other thing I also want to tell you about her book, which came up recently with Mead Press, and next slide, yeah. So it's called Material Witness, and it's when material is becoming a witness of certain processes. So becoming a witness and evidence for some regime of violence or abuse in nature, in politics, in war conflict. So, and now this material of ice is one of the case she's talking over there about. So next case or next artist which I want to talk about is a Finnish artist, Terika Hapaja, based in New York. At the moment, I'm not sure. So for her, she's very much concerned in her practice about othering, and the core of Eurocentric tradition in that, especially in the legislative and language. When in European law there is just a second. So when there is in European law, legally, things and persons are ontologically divided. And so there is division between subject and object, and therefore it gives a certain right, in a way, of violating rights of those who consider to be a thing. And in the law, usually non-human belong to humans, so they treat it as thing. So therefore, she is sort of thinking how to look at the law when look at the law from democratic system and democratic view, when views and voices of many will be included. Voices of silent and excluded could be included into this discourse. And in 2011, she launched or came up with an idea. In 2011, when it was a political election, parliamentary election in Finland, and it's really like the narrative of the campaign was very much penetrated with xenophobic, white right-wing sort of a mood, and the Party of Others is a response to this changing political narrative and regime and distribution of power. So this is a sound installation which is based on several interviews when people represent different political and social group of people whose rights are somehow suppressed in one way or another. And so they've been asked question, what would be a community without an exclusion look like? So what kind of community we can build up and include everyone? So as her other project, which she developed with her partner, professional partner Laura Gustafsson, is the Museum of History of Cattle. So it's a big project which travels quite actively from one place to another, and it consists of the different artifacts which shows the relation between cattle and human. And so she's so through this project narrates from the voice of a cow and put into perspective of a long-lasting common and interdependent historical relationship between humans and cattle. So they say that we lend our tongue and our language to them and speak on their behalf. Another project I want to briefly talk about, it's called the last house of Kupchina, and that's a project which we conducted, like me and my colleague, our curatorial collective talk, conducted in 2013, and it's a part of our ongoing project called Critical Mass that land into different problems in St. Petersburg or in megacities. Every 2 years we work with different subjects, but this season was very much connected. It's landed in Kupchina as a kind of outskirt area. We were looking at its history and its potential. So Irish artist Gareth Kennedy came across during his research trip of a history of one family, it's Nutskov family, whose house was the last wooden house in Kupchina area. And next slide, please. So this house was the last one. I mean, we don't see, is it possible to scroll a little bit so we can see the whole picture? No? Okay, anyways, so over there is a kind of mass housing, and this is the last wooden house. It's a picture from a family archive of Nutskov family from 1976. And the family was moved by force, and the house was removed forcefully in 1976 when there is this mass housing project were taking place. So nothing was built actually on that spot because they found later on the groundwaters are very high. So what remained is a stone from the foundation of the house, and family comes to this stone every year in a certain day and celebrate their family, their unity, their roots. And Gareth came across of this story, and he built up whole project around it. So what is interesting about his practice is that he is he explores the social agency of handcraft in the 21st century, and he works with the some sort of like critical anarchisms. In this case, it was a birch tree. So he found some kind of important cultural codes in different situation or a different locality, and he builds up his project around this. So to bring it up into a new context. So what happened was he involved into the story young men from vocational college Krasnoderevets who who learned to be carpenters. So and they composed this this architectural structure of the house. I mean, in a small scale, based on family archive, architectural drawing of that house. And by doing this, he also sort of brought different feelings of material to this young man, and also connected to the sort of a history of the neighborhood where the school locates. And then he also took this idea of Leshay, and also together with kids from school 302, that has a museum of history of Kupchina. So they built. He sort of composed different costumes from bird bark, And they, like Lieshes, did this public procession in Kupchino, while guys from Krasnoderevets Vocational College brought the construction to the spot where Nutskov house was. So it was a big public moment, and then it was a big celebration of the family. Next slide. Yeah. And that was very important in a way to for that family, for that particular people who lost their house, to sort of brought their personal stories into the wider public national history, really. So I will stop here. So I'm try to connect this materiality and history of material culture, different material of evidence, and also combination with the questioning of legislative system into my talk, and also in relation to our overall theme of the seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Now we have time for a discussion, and if you want to ask some question to our presenters, except Simon Perton, who has sent presentations to us. Unfortunately, we can't just discuss this presentation, but in other cases, we can talk, you can share your opinions, suggestions, and so on. So we have 2 microphones, and we are open for discussion. Is anybody ready? Any questions, suggestions, opinions? Yes.
Thank you for your. Thank you for your presentations, and I have a question: whether there is some opposition of this ecological view to the art. For example, people who think that these projects are too political, or maybe too, I don't know, who underestimate the problem of ecological changes, global changes in with climate and so on. Maybe there is some opposite way of art who argue the main points of this view on this problem. I don't know whether it's clear. There is that democracy and social processes, and maybe there are some art opposition this climate problem, and what are the discussion about it? Maybe clear.
I think I might. I mean, I'm not sure I understood correctly the question, but I may maybe comment from my position, from me working in contemporary art. So, like in general, the agenda of contemporary art is very much connected to sort of to show the best of society, and through the project. So since art is a very, in a way, imaginative field, so lots of things happening there, and everything is possible. And it could be like futuristic, imaginative, and it's like lots of artists. I mean, at least which I'm working with, they're very much their main overall desire or idea to talk and bring into our in their works cases of social injustice, bring them into discussion, and make processes that are not obvious, hidden, embedded into our everyday life, therefore causing lots of violence slowly but constantly. So that's in a way like overall idea and I guess program of contemporary art, which is aware of different social and political processes and problems.
Okay, do you have something to add or questions?
Question from Nabil. How can we encourage other creative, diverse artists and art practitioners to adopt that method of your work?
And I'm sorry because we have listeners in Zoom, so it's better to use.
So yeah, question for Nabil. How can we actually encourage other creative, diverse artists and practitioners to adopt that way of working the way you do with natural products and dyes and paints? How can we actually get them to use that process?
Question, Indy. I think when artists are, well, so I can speak for myself, and when I'm working with the materials, it's personal. I connect with my surroundings in a natural way. I do it in any form of creativity. We've all started doing creativity when we were kids. Some of us just continue doing it years on end. I think with other artists, they need to find their pathway in nature if they want to connect to it. If people just connect with better, in the festivals, create things from your garden, which people do. I think a lot of people are already doing it, but they don't realise they are doing it. For other artists to process materials from nature, that's just doing some research. That's just doing homework. It depends what you want to achieve at the end of the day. If it's theory or political theory, every artist has their own on-take when it comes down to nature. There are many artists that use synthetic materials, which is fine. Many artists that visit shops, but especially we've found from the pandemic, a lot of locality shops and areas where people buy their art or art materials no longer exist. They're closed down. So, a good way of finding your materials, tailor make it for yourself. Go out there, whatever industry you're venturing into, find your materials, because it is material based, but it's having that intimate relationship with the materials that you're using. In other words, taking authorship and ownership of your craft when you're actually developing work. That's pretty much what I have to say for other artists if they want to venture down into a pathway to do with nature.
Yeah, I just want, I know we're a little bit behind the schedule, but I just want to maybe conclude our part about artistic practices with the remark about that there is a huge potential for contemporary creative practices and theories, critical theories, in working and researching and revitalizing, making alive, making more useful in a way the collection of Kunstkamera. There is a really rich knowledge composed here, and it's I think there is a potential for contemporary artists to bring it out, rethink it, frame it in a contemporary society. So that would be bring people closer to the roots or core of certain knowledge and certain hope some
I've got a what practices technology and if is kind of worsening the climate environment in a way.
How we technology through the internet and all the minerals and elements that are made into our phones and our in green stuff. I mean, it can be contradictory, but it's. I mean, I was trained in the London Art Studios in the 1980s, and you know, I was an artist before I went into art school, and I was using technology in the studios, but I was trained on the drawing board, so we were trained with traditional drawing skills. And when technology came over, a lot of people overnight was made redundant because of the technology. But you learn to adapt. It's like everything. I'm just talking from the technological perspective. You can use it for your advantages, but in art, it does have its place. I think it does have its place.
Yeah, I don't mind technology while using it, but as long as you're aware what they do, and as long as you keep yourself informed about reasons and consequences, then you can, in a way, control it at least for yourself. And I think that's what important to understand in that particular discourse.
Thank you, colleagues, and we're moving to the next section. And the next section, global and local dimensions of climate change. And the first presenter in this section, we are welcoming Angelina Davidova, and her presentation talking about climate change in Russia, social, media, and cultural dimensions.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this seminar. I will be speaking without presentation, so that will be just a talk. And I'll start by saying great thank you to all of the organizers of this event. For me, it was a true pleasure and a true honor to be working with Nabil Ali and Anna Bitkina, and also the colleagues from Kunstkamera. And I think it is indeed a very highly topical theme we are talking about now, and it's also the sector in which I've been active for more than 12 years by now in Russia and also worldwide. And I've been asked to talk about climate change discourses in social media and cultural dimensions in Russia. And I'll just like to tell a few stories to you, and maybe also give a very brief historic perspective of what has been happening a few years ago and what is happening now. So I also hope that my input will be somewhat of a bridge between the first part, which was mostly dedicated to art practices, and then our second part, which will be mostly directed to environmental and cultural aspects of climate change, including immediate aspects of climate change influencing St. Petersburg area, and also including like an issue of coastal erosion, of which the colleagues who speak after me, including Daria and Anna, will be giving a more profound and scientific background. So I will start by saying that I've been working, as I already said, I've been working on the topic of climate change for more than 12 years by now. And I basically experienced the growth of importance of this topic in Russia in various contexts. In political context, in economic context, in media context, in social context. And if, say, 10 years ago, we would still get a lot of, I would maybe not even say denial attitudes, but more of an attitude that climate change was something irrelevant for Russia, something more unimportant for Russia. I seriously see that attitude changing, and I seriously see less skepticism about the topic in Russia. I usually bring examples of these jokes. For example, like 10 years ago, it was very common to hear jokes that how Russia will only benefit from climate change, and how we will have bananas and strawberries growing in Siberia, and how we will not need any fur coats. I think now, with the country gradually realizing that we see more and more consequences of climate change in various regions across Russia, that level of understanding is also getting deeper, and the level of concern is also getting much deeper than what it used to be before. Speaking more specifically about consequences, I would like to draw your attention to regular scientific reports which are published by the Roshydromet, which is official Russian meteorological service, which works as the part of the Russian Ministry of Natural Resources. And those reports overview all the recent climate change consequences we observe in Russia, and they're also trying to predict what is we can see in future. And just to name a few consequences of climate change in Russia, and it's also something which I drafted for the sculptures. As you remember, Nabil was mentioning that for every sculpture, there's one particular aspect of climate change, and that can be climate-related risk, it can be maybe a way to decrease greenhouse emissions, it may be also a way to adapt to climate change. And I've been also trying to think what kind of consequences of climate change are mostly present in Russia now. What are the ones we observe already across the country? Because Russia is a very vast country, and we obviously see various consequences of climate change in various parts of the country. And I name quite a few, something from the wildfires. This is obviously a huge topic. It's a huge media topic. It's something we should probably see and read about a lot in the media in the last few years. And last year it became particularly worrying, also especially for our region, the northwest of Russia, when even Karelian forests, which were traditionally considered to be rather humid forests, actually experienced and suffered a lot from wildfires. And firefighters were also very active in Karelia fighting forest fires throughout the summer and also later into the fall. In addition to forest fires and wildfires, I would also obviously mention melting permafrost. More than 60% of Russia's territory is covered with something which in English we call permafrost, and I think in the English word there's something which says that it's permanent. However, within Russian language, we and the scientific community does not use вечная мерзлота anymore, meaning permanent or eternal freeze of Earth. It rather says многолетняя мерзлота these days, which means something which lasts only for a number of years. And I believe there's also an understanding that globally we will experience that, and there'll be more and more melting of permafrost across various areas. Some areas will become completely free of permafrost. Some areas will just have a thinner layer of permafrost. And all of this is obviously a very worrying trend. It's also something which in science is called positive feedback effect. Likewise with the forest fires, meaning the more acute climate change gets, the more drastic changes in weather patterns we have, and the more trends of permafrost melting we experience, and likewise wildfires. But then these two trends, they also emit quite a lot of greenhouse gases back into the atmosphere, both CO2 and in case of permafrost, it's also the methane, which actually makes climate change a much more serious problem. I mean, there are various estimations, and the IPCC, which is an international panel of scientists analyzing global climate change, I think their recent estimates, and one of the scenarios actually say that permafrost melting can contribute up to 20% of all greenhouse gases by the end of the 21st century. which is obviously a very worrying trend. Now, closer to St. Petersburg, one very visible consequence of climate change is coastal erosion, but I would leave the colleagues who speak after me to tell you more details about it and to show you all the trends which happens right here and right now. And so I just mentioned a few. I mean, there are also further ones, including dust winds in the south of Russia and desertification, and many other unfavorable for humans, for animals, for ecosystems, for our economic conditions, for infrastructure of our cities, trends which have already direct influence, something we can see already. And as I also mentioned in the beginning, climate change is something which is becoming increasingly acknowledged in Russia on political level, on economic level, and social and media level. And it's also, if we speak about the social level and like general awareness of climate change, there are various kinds of estimations of it. I mean, on one hand, we can speak about sociological polls. And here in the polls, I mean, if we ask people all across the country in various regions, well, first of all, the question is whether they're concerned about environmental problems. There we keep getting more and more positive answers throughout the last years. Yes, people are becoming increasingly concerned by environmental issues and environmental problems. And many of them put these concerns within the three major problems which they experience and which they worry about. But then if we specify and we go deeper into which particular environmental problems they are concerned with, then in most cases it will be very local environmental problems, or like I usually say hyper-local environmental problems. And those would be, for example, air pollution or information about air pollution or water pollution, information about what's happening in their immediate environment. And then the second topic would also be something about green areas in their urban cities, in urban environments. And those would be parks and also green areas. It's something people value a lot. It's something people see as immediate presence of nature and something natural in the urban environments. It's also something which, for which people are willing to, I would say, fight for and also organize environmental campaigns. And we see how many regional campaigns all across Russia in the last few years have actually been connected to urban green areas and, keeping of the ones which exist and then creating the new ones. And then the third topic would probably be all issues connected with waste and waste management, landfills, but also plans to build incinerators, issues connected with recycling or circular economy, and these topics will be probably like number 3. Now, where is climate change in all of this? If we expand the list of these environmental topics from 3 to 10, climate change usually comes like number 7 or number 8 in Russia. In many parts of Russia, among general public, it's still being viewed as rather global and maybe something not directly afflicting people's lives. But then if we see this trend more in a historic perspective and see like what were people answering, say, 5 years ago and what they answer now, we still see a positive trend here as well. More and more people are becoming interested in the topic. Many young people actually becoming increasingly interested in the topic. And we also have many climate movements in Russia, including the Fridays for Future. And we also have many groups of population getting interested, like what is climate change? What are the strange patterns in weather we experience? Why is it happening? Can we do something about it? But also I think a particularly important question for Russia, whose economy is highly dependent on producing and exports of carbon-intensive goods and products, from oil and coal to steel and other metals and materials. What is the future of Russia's economy in a new decarbonized world? Because if we speak about climate change, we can obviously not only speak about these natural consequences of it, these changes in nature, which is the topic of our seminar, is also highly connected to economic activities of people. And I think a particularly important question for Russia is what is Russian role and what is Russia's role in this new decarbonizing world, in this new low carbon world. And I think this is also opens up a very new interesting area of discussions, which is also currently taking place at the moment. Coming very briefly to the cultural dimensions. I think Anna already gave a very beautiful overview of the way climate change can be. Yes, yes, there are three, but then she brought very interesting concrete examples of the three particular artists, like a number of them from the UK and also someone from Finland. I'm someone who's been working with this topic, as I said, for many years, and I would actually like to say that my professional climate career began with an art-related project. It was a project which was called Moving Baltic Sea, and it was back in 2008. And there was a sail ship which was coming from Germany across the southern shore of the Gulf of Finland, and it would stop at every country, and in every port city there will be a large festival which was trying to connect arts in forms of contemporary art, photography, music, and films with environmental and climate topics. So this is actually what brought me to what I am at the moment. And then it continued with another project which was called Überlebenskunst, which is like art to survive in English. And it was an international project which joined Russia, Germany, Kenya, Brazil, and India in a global talk about the future, sustainability, and art, and the role of artists in with that respect. But then what I see in recent years, and more specifically in the last 3 years, there's a huge interest among Russian cultural and art community towards questions of sustainability, environmental problems, environmental decay, climate change, biodiversity. And I could just briefly name a few because I don't have that much time left. I would name the exhibition which was in Garage in 2019, which was called The Coming World, Ecology as the New Politics, which was probably one of the largest exhibitions, one of the first largest exhibitions, which took place in Russia. And then this summer, or last summer, 2021, there was a large exhibition of the Recycle Group in Manege, which is also now currently on exhibit in Moscow. And then also currently still running, there's a large international exhibition called Hydra at the Sevkabil, which also brought this topic to wider public attention of the audience in St. Petersburg, but also other people visiting here. So I think, yes, and another project I also wanted to mention is that last November, there was the first in Russia festival, theater festival of plays which were connected with environmental and climate topics. And that festival took place in Alexandrinsky Theater, and the idea is to continue working in this area, in the area of like theater plays and theater production, performances. And the next project coming up in Alexandrinsky Theater will be this June and July, and it's called Climate Caravans. It will be a theater laboratory which will be working with the questions of climate change and theater. So I would probably stop here, and so because I know there are many other speakers who are willing to share their expertise. But I just wanted to sum up saying that it's very interesting to observe and to see what's happening around us at the moment on various levels. On one hand, climate change does not equal global warming. Climate change does not equal the process that it will be warmer everywhere around us. Climate change means more of a destabilizing global climate system. It means life will not be the same the way it used to be before. It means many of our aspects of life will change, from technology around us to the way we think about what is ethical and what is not ethical, what is moral and what is not moral. And I believe the role of art here is very large, and this is also what we hear and we talk about today. And I also believe it's very productive, and it's actually very useful to have such kinds of conversations which bring artists, which bring scientists, which bring environmental activists, which brings people from museums and archives, and will also bring people who work with the past, who work with the present, and who work with the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angelina. And I would like to invite the next presenter, Daria Rybchuk, with the paper Geological Records of the Past, Clue to Understanding the Gulf of Finland Environment and Climate Change.
Okay, first of all, thanks a lot to organizers. It's great. It's very rare when geologists are involved into the discussion about the climate change, and actually it's really strange. Once, when I was preparing the lecture like this one, I made the experiment. I asked the question to my colleagues and family. The first word which you are thinking about mentioning climate change, and as you can see, even among my colleagues geologists, nobody mentioned geology. If we will have a look at the list of HELCOM parameters of climate change fact sheet, again you'll find just three more or less terms which more or less linking with geology, like sediment transportation, erosion and sedimentation, and maybe hazardous substances. And of course, in our official level in the ministries, nobody think that geologists should take care about climate change. Geologists should find the resources. And of course it's true, but it's a big mistake. I would like just to remind you that as long ago as in 18th century, there was started the so-called Great Geological Controversy, when for the first time, very high in the mountains in sedimentary rocks, there were found some remains of ancient mollusks, and people just understood how great was these changes in environment during the past geological time. And also being here in this fantastic institute at museum, I would like to remind you about geological time, which we geologists operate. Today, when we were going along the museum, it seemed that the mankind history is endless, and the cultures is so rich, and but we should remember, we people should remember that from geological point of view, if we, this scheme was proposed by Professor Sergei Romanovsky from our institute, and if we will see, we will think about all Earth history as 1 year, the first very long time, by the end of March, will be practically lifeless before first bacteria could be found. And just December 12th is the golden age for dinosaurs. And we, people, we live in this planet for so short time. And our Christmas is just 4 seconds, last 4 seconds. So, of course, we are very important. We can transform the Earth. We can destroy it, unfortunately, but our time is very, very short. Let's remember about it. And our Eastern Gulf of Finland is a fantastic area where people lived for a long, long time, Neolithic people. And I would like to demonstrate today how huge was, again, the changes of sea level, for example. And here are some reconstructions, paleogeographical reconstructions during last 9,000 years. So as you can see, this point mark the place where we are right now. So several times during very short, from geological point of view, time, it was, for example, sea bottom. And our problem today is that actually we are not ready anymore to make it sea bottom again. So the coastal zone is very important for the mankind. As we know, approximately 50% of world population lives in the very narrow strip of about 100 kilometers from the coastline, and a lot of huge cities are located along the coast as well. Also, coastal zone, both onshore and offshore, is fantastically very, very important from environmental point of view, from biodiversity point of view. And also our coasts are just very wonderful. Here are some samples of the beach. And as for the anthropogenic impact. Here is the sample, the typical sample of the Neva Bay coasts. As you can see, they are not so attractive, and there could be two directions, two trends of anthropogenic impact. I suppose that nobody can tell that this is bad practice, but this is also sample from the Neva Bay. Frankly speaking, fortunately, it's these photos were made in some years ago, and now it's a bit more attractive. More tech. But anyway, there are still problems of the waste disposals, which is the important source of hazardous substances for Neva Bay and Gulf of Finland ecosystem. I have today, I will demonstrate today just 3 slides about methods, as I have no time for this. So what do we have? First, we have relict coastal forms, which could be found. We have relict coastal forms which can be found now offshore and onshore. And studying these coastal forms, we can reconstruct the sea level change, for example, for the past. And also, today Anna already mentioned the ice cores, which source for environmental information. The other, the same or different, but very important source of this information is bottom sediments of the sea. And we just took such a huge metal tubes and receive this fantastic cores, and then studying them very carefully, millimeter by millimeter, because the bottom sediments during deposition, particle by particle, layer by layer, include the information about paleo-environmental and climate change. And then we using a lot of different methods. Again, just trust me that it's possible. Of course, it's always a question of discussions, but we can reconstruct the climate change and environmental changes. So what do we find about our region? First of all, it's very important, the pre-quaternary geology, which is in Finland and Sweden and represented by very solid and not erodible magmatic and metamorphic rocks, while the southern coast consists of more easily erodible sedimentary rocks. Then the formation of our coast started during the last glacial period, when the huge ice sheet was moving here, and this very well known to you base of southern coast of the Gulf was formed during this movement. And here are again the reconstructions of the last glaciation, very well known for all of you. And you can see that about 20,000 years ago, the ice sheet had the maximal extent, and after that the climate changed. And during the warming, the ice sheet started to melt it. And what is important, this is the time period when the edge of ice sheet moved across our eastern Gulf of Finland. And what is very important, it leaves here the huge amount of sand, gravel, clay, and other material, from which during the next time period, Holocene, was constructed all our accumulation sand forms here. And here I would like to tell you about a very short but very interesting sample of interaction of interdisciplinary research of geologists and archaeologists. It's Narva-Luga Clint Bay. And we were invited by Dr. Dmitry Gerasimov to work together with archaeologists. And actually this cooperation was very fruitful because for us, it is the place of a lot of relict accretion forms, and for archaeologists, it's place of a lot of archaeological sites. And we have found, as you can see, that there is some strange triangle which is practically perpendicular to the recent shoreline. So it couldn't be actually coastal accretion form. And after some ground penetrating radar investigation, profiling, we have found a very strange with steep slopes, sand and gravel paleodelta, as you can see. This is the reconstruction of this paleodelta, but the layers was directed from the sea to the shore, so it couldn't be any river. And we have found that it's so-called glacial fluvial paleodelta, and the same. So it's the grade you can understand that this 30 meters thick layers of sand gravel during the Holocene, when it's the same relief form on the northern coast of the Gulf. So it was the source of the future accretion form development. Wow, no. No. Well, then very far here you can see the different time period, different paleobasins which represent slightly salty Yoldia Sea, then fresh Ancylus Lake, and then a Littorina Sea. During this time period, as you can see, the area of the sea was much larger than today. And okay, here is the samples of the sea level change, just to demonstrate you how big was the amplitude of these changes during last 8,000 years. So, okay, maybe I will skip all these slides as I would like to demonstrate you that according to results of sediment core analysis during Holocene, there was some period of time during which the climate was even warmer than today. So, after the maximal of littering and transgression, the sea level started to drop, and it was very, very important time for from geoarchaeological point of view, as here around there was several big lagoonal system. One in the Narvaluva Clean Bay, the second around Sistoretsk lowland, and this one again ceramics, archaeological science, and lagoon, and the third one in Okhta. This is some reconstruction. So, just keep all this fantastically interesting material. So, from this first, the second will be very, very short. So, what I would like to emphasize that during last 8,000 years, environmental change was very, very large here in our area, and people who dwell in these areas, they had a lot of time. Yes, they were not in hurry, and they just followed the coast and lived and hunted and fishing and so on. And this is, it was fantastic to me, your first slide today about coastal erosion, because it's the topic which I can talk hours and hours. And as you can see from these slides, it's very important problem for our area. St. Petersburg provide a lot of very interesting historical data, which together with our scientific method, permit us to reconstruct how much was, for example, coastal erosion. You can see in Zelenogorsk the slide of young lady sitting on the top of some monument. And this level now it's somewhere here, the other young lady. So we lost about 100 meters wide and about 4 meters high beach. So coastal erosion, here I can, again, trust me, now we have a lot of very long coastal monitoring, and we know how does it happen and why doesn't happen. And what is important from our today point of view. We observe extreme erosion event during this coincidence of these three factors. And as you easily can see, they are climate dependable. So once we had a very interesting project together with our Finnish colleagues during this project, we are trying to present some kind of forecast of future development, and unfortunately it's not very good because we are going to lose a lot of very our fantastic beaches in future. And there are two possible adaptations. We can escape or we can struggle. But how should we struggle? This is the worst possible decision, concrete seawalls, just several slides with no comments. And this is best possible decision, just very, very gentle measures when we understand the nature, the natural appropriateness, and just help nature to construct the beach. So it's sand nourishment, artificial beaches, and some such decision like, for example, these artificial ridges, when we construct actually a submarine by preventing the coast from the erosion, but it is vegetation and it's artificial ridge, which is beautiful decision for coast protection, for tourism, and for ecosystem also. And my last several slides, a bit sad, because here are examples from our region. You can see the bad coast protection practice, which unfortunately prevail now in the Eastern Gulf of Finland. 2006, you can see the beach between Solnichne and Repino, and after that, concrete wall, and after that, the situation is worst and worst and worst, and yeah, it's Lysinos. It's very fresh sample of fantastically stupid coast protection, very recent. So, yeah, this is my last slide, that it depends on us. It's a bit very Russian. I don't understand. I'm not sure that it's possible to translate into English. But anthroposphere can be noosphere or sphere of razuma, sphere. Thank you very much. Sorry, I would like to tell more.
Thank you very much, Daria. It's a pity to interrupt. It was really interesting, and it seems to me now that just a seminar for these problematics from different views and research perspective is not enough. We need Congress, for sure. And I would like to invite to join us Anna Ushakova. She is in Zoom. Anna, is it okay to listen us, to hear us?
Yes.
Okay. And Anna Ushakova will present paper Climate Change Impact on the Baltic Sea and River Basins. Please, Anna, we are listening you very well.
Okay. So my name is Anna Ushakova. I'm working for Friends of the Baltic. It's a non-governmental ecological organization. And also today I represent Coalition of Clean Baltic. And today I'm going to talk about climate change impact on the Baltic Sea and river basin. And also I would like to share some activities of my organization and tell you about it a little bit later. So climate change is a recognized fact, and it is a global process that affects all aspects of our life. Water issues such as floods and droughts and also sea storms are among the most negative effects from the climate change around the world, including the Baltic Sea region. And if we talk about Baltic Sea region, there are very brief information from HELCOM report. It's climate change in Baltic Sea fact sheet, and there are several physical parameters which directly affected by climate change. And first of all, it's air temperature. Air temperature shows the clearest response to increased greenhouse emission. A significant air temperature increase in Baltic Sea region has been observed during the last century, and it's larger than in global trend. And in this increase is expected to continue. And in addition, warm extremes are projected to become more frequent too. Another physical parameter is water temperature and sea surface temperature. So seas around the globe have become warmer during the past 30 years. The sea surface temperature of the Baltic Sea has warmed more than the average for the global ocean and will continue to warm. And another parameter is sea ice. Baltic Sea over the past 100 years, the winter have become milder, and the ice seasons shorter, and the maximum ice expand decreased. This development is expected to continue in a changing climate. And one more parameter is sea level. Baltic Sea level is rising and will continue to rise. And it's of course depends on sea level in Atlantic Ocean, especially in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean, and also storm surges and are sensitive to changes in atmospheric circulation, and future changes are uncertain. But if you talk about sea storms, they are also becoming more frequent. And there are very recent examples from Kaliningrad region. A week ago, as a result of a powerful storm, the observation desk in part of the shore on the Curonian speed were swept away. And you can see how it looks like now. If we talk about not only Baltic Sea itself, but about Baltic catchment area, there are also some impacts from climate change. It is increase of the overall level of runoff and also increase of the level of nutrients in the water basin. What's wrong with nutrients in water basin? Maybe you have heard that eutrophication it is the most hottest problem for Baltic Sea. You might see this blue-green algae on Baltic Gulf of Finland shores. So it is eutrophication results, and it's happening because of nutrient load. And it's quite a huge problem for Baltic Sea because eutrophication causes massive dead zones in Baltic Sea, and it is an area with oxygen-starving waters where the most marine animals can survive. And according the future forecast for this process, we can see that even in the best scenario, the most positive scenario, these dead zones will grow. Baltic countries accepted new Baltic Sea Action Plan, and the main goal of this Baltic Sea Action Plan to keep Baltic Sea with good environmental status, but eutrophication is one of the main goals of this activity. And if we will talk about river basin in Baltic Sea catchment area, it's also have impact of climate change, and here we also can see deterioration of water quality, eutrophy, and we collected statistics of droughts and floods. And also we shared adaptation measures and regulatory instruments and documents for European countries and also for non-European countries like Russia and Belarus. And also we shared example of good water management from Helsinki, and to told how they adapt to climate change consequences in urban area. And also we gave some cases about flood risk management on transboundary rivers in Vistula and Nema. And we discussed suggestions for improving flood management tools in European countries and also in non-European countries like Belarus and Russia. And all information of this campaign you can find in our reports, Flood Risk Management in the Baltic Sea region. You can find this report on CCB webpage, there are a link. And also on Friends of the Baltic webpage, it's available in Russian and in English too. And also you can read all the articles, all the posts in our social network, vk.com, on our webpage, Friends of the Baltic. And it was very successful from our point of view campaign, because topic was very specific and very narrow, but in 5 days of campaign we managed to reach more than 13,000 people and collect more than 150 reactions from our followers in social media. And plus these results, we also posted information in English in CCB Facebook page, and also our colleague from Estonia and Latvia, they translated both posts and articles to their national language and also spread it within their social media in Facebook and Twitter. And there are some examples of flooding around the Baltic. It's Estonia, Latvia and Belarus. You can find more in our webpage. And one more activity which I would like to share with you, it's our media tour for journalists and bloggers. It was last year in August, and we point a real example of the effects of climate change on northern and southern coast of the Gulf of Finland. And here you can see pictures. It was one, for example, left pictures. There is a chairwoman of Garden Partnership, and she told us about that flooding in the Garden Partnership become more frequent last 15 years. And also she shared information how they deal with this and what kind of damage infrastructure it can cause for people who live in these villages. And there are pictures from recent flood in this area as well. And according to the statistic, it's Kurortny district on Sistra River, and according to the statistics, the past 30 years, there has been in the number of floods, including extreme ones. And the largest of these extreme events were in October 2018 and in February 2020. I think it's one of the flooding in 2020. And also we pointed some positive spots. For example, we talk about how we can control water quality in our water bodies, and we present different express tests how to determine the water quality, especially for biogenics. And also we show good solutions how to prevent our water bodies from nutrient pollutions. It is dry toilet with separate collection and composting of waste, and it is an environmentally safe alternative to cesspools. And another sport was about coastal destructions, and it is pictures from Letna, Northern districts, and climate change has increased the factors of coastal destruction as well, and storms are becoming more frequent, and reduction of ice cover is also received, and rise of the water level. And of course, climate change consequences make harder these events. Following the results of Media 2, dozens of media outlets and the borders in St. Petersburg and Leningrad region published articles on the topic of the relationship between climate and water. And it was our main goal to raise awareness about climate change consequences and to attract more attention to this topic. And of course, we are going to continue our work. And one of our goals is to make scientific research conducted in Baltic Sea region to make it more understandable and more accessible to the widest range of people, and to show as many as possible people that the consequences of climate change are not somewhere far away, but they are happening right now near us, and it affects our lives even now. So thank you for your attention, and you have some questions. And also I would like to say that it's very important that arts also attract attention to this topic, and we talk about it more, and I think it's really useful for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna, so much. Hope you listen, applauses. And so I would like to offer you to move on the next section and to have a joint discussion after that, because we're a little bit behind our schedule. Just in case if somebody has special questions or comments on last three presentations that we had. But if you are not against to discuss all presentations after the next section, we will move on, okay? And I would like to invite here Sofia Unru, who is her presentation, Influence of Climate Conditions on Traditional Life Support Systems of the Indigenous Peoples in Russian Arctic. So we are starting our section, Decolonizing History and Indigenous Knowledge, and discussing anthropological methods in climate change. Камера вас не увидит. Там так, уголочек. Угу. Да.
Можно сделать слайд-шоу? Название другое. Hello everyone. I'm working at the Institute of the Peoples of the North, Kherson State Pedagogical University of Russia. And over many centuries of living in the Arctic, indigenous peoples have developed ways of adapt to the condition of high latitudes, which allowed them not only to survive, but also thrive in a harsh natural environment. The unique life support system of this people is closely related to the climate and geographical living conditions. Deep knowledge about nature, about the habits of animals, about the properties of plants, about natural cycles is reflected in the national calendar, which binds economic activity to the seasons. The names of the months mean one of another type of traditional crafts or natural phenomena. Indigenous peoples have many meteorological signs. According to the stories of the famous Chukchi writer Yuri Erdhel, in the morning the first task for children was to get out of the yaranga and observe the weather. After returning, the children reported their observations: clouds, wind direction, snow condition. Based on this data, adults planned their business for the day. A lot depends on snow, the possibility of hunting, nomad, going to sea. This is that's why many words related to snow and ice are used in the language of the Arctic peoples. The amazing viability of the Arctic ethnic groups is due to the use of products needed in high latitudes. Scientists have found that in the Arctic, a person feels the needs for a high lipid food. These are fatty varieties of fish and fat of sea animals, meat of wild and domestic reindeer. Such a diet ensures the quality of adaptation to the extreme conditions of the Arctic. All elements of indigenous culture were formed as a response to environmental challenges. The dwelling, clothes and shoes made of deer skins allow to withstand frosts of 15 degrees. The material culture and food system of the peoples of the Arctic depend on the results of hunting and fishing. But today, climate change has seriously affected the migration of wild deer and marine life seeking colder waters. In recent years, throughout the Arctic, according to information received from students of the Institute of the Peoples of the North, the production of wild deer and fishing has been declining. Warming leads to the formation of a snow crust, about which domestic deer herds their feed. Hunting, which is conducted in winter on the tracks of animals, is impossible without snowfall. This undermines the foundations of the culture of the Arctic ethnic groups. In the condition of climate change, the ways of life that have been worked out for centuries cease to be effective, which raises the question, will the peoples of the Arctic be able to make changes in their culture as quickly as the climate is changing? Traditional culture tends to preserve values and knowledge and avoids innovation. Adaptation of the organism of the Arctic people to the conditions of the high latitudes requires a separate discussion. They have features of metabolism, features in the work of lungs and gallbladder. Evolution has taken millennia, and the change caused by climate mitigation also take time. Therefore, the disappearance of unique Arctic cultures is a reality of humanity may face already in this century if it doesn't pay attention to the problems of global warming. Thank you.
So we are impressed by pictures. Thank you very much, Sofia. That's ethnographic content is always illustrating. Thank you very much. And the next paper. The next paper, Cultural Dimension of the Arctic Landscapes, 2 points of view. And we're welcoming Konstantin Klokov.
I will speak about the futures of nature, space and type perception in different texts of inhabitants of the North. And, sorry? Okay. So the idea of this presentation, for this presentation, were inspired by Tim Ingold, Perception of the Environment, very famous book, and as well as the work of Frankfurt connected with the essay of speculative source of the ancient Near East. So we will see that's very, very similar approach. So you know that we perceive, when we perceive the environment, we have some filters, then we have sensory perception, image of objects, and then it is interconnection with these objects, and then we construct the word model, and this word model produce filters. So in the results, two different person can see quite different landscape. So you can see here as the tree as the several faces. And we will compare the perception of indigenous and non-indigenous authors from northeast of Russia, first of all of Chukotka, and we will use poems of Chukotka poets, and as well we will use the drawing of Victor Temnevie, because it's difficult to convey the beauty of poetry in other languages, but drawing of Victor Temnevie are very impressive. This is from archive of the House of Folk of Art in another. And the non-indigenous picture or image will be presented in a poem and song written by Alexander Gradnitsky, the most famous bard of the Russian North, as well as by writer Oleg Kuvayev. His novel Territory about gold diggers in Chukotka was written in Soviet period and was later published in over than 30 editions. And both authors are geologists and worked in the north for many years. As well, indigenous as well as non-indigenous image were created by people who sincerely loved the north, but they have different perceiving. And the distinction of these two images is correlated with the differences in stereotypes. And my interviews and observations during fieldwork in Chukotka and other northern regions showed that this difference in behaviors, stereotypes is between indigenous and non-indigenous people is very important, but it very varies, and context that determine this pattern can be very diverse. The focus of my analysis or content analysis was, first of all, what is the nature of the North appealing to the reader? Is it a dialogue between lyrical hero and the nature, possible or not? And what are the spatial temporal aspects of the North perception, in particular relation between North and South, past and future? So I used several poems of several authors, like from Chukotka, Antonina Kamutval, from Muhamorne village of another district, Zoyan Lumkina, very famous poetess from Naukan village, and Vladimir Teneskin, Chukchi poet from Konergina Tundra of Yultinsky district, Mikhail Valkirkin from Oilkal on the coast of the Bay of Crest in Chukotka, Sergei Tergirkin from Amgoyama Tundra, and picture of Victor Temnevie. So what is most important in this image? First of all, it is warmth and sunshine. So this is poems translated into English. My pronunciation is not very good, because so I don't want to read them myself. You can read yourself. I think it will be better. So the first is the warm and sunshine, and the reason is that there's no much sun in Chukotka, so it is very precious. Sun is very precious. Second thing is the dialogue. It is a dialogue between authors and between nature, between birds, animals, and all the nature. So you can read this about the Naukan spring. It's in Russia. It's maybe a little bit more impressive. Then next is the friendship. So animal, grass, people, everybody in Tundra are friends. And you can also read this poem and see expressive picture of Victor Temnevia. Then there is a lot of attention to render. This is, we can say, the most important, that I can't live without the render, and render cannot live without me. And the principal idea is render, and render. Then a sweet home, and sometimes it is very questionable things. It's the snowstorms in eastern is the Earth's mother breeze, and its mission is to test my people who live here. Do they have enough forces? Are people capable to struggle for the fire burn in Yaranga until sunshine returns? Then also very important is the connection between south and north, and it's to some extent authors here it is Vladimir Teneskin, he is responsible how to show to people which that don't know the north how beautiful is the north. I could shine for the people of other land. And several drawn of Victor Temnevia I will only show on the picture. It is important also in his picture and in his text this connection of the past, the memory of Chukchi people. The memory is very important point of poems and drawing. So we can see that most important for indigenous North image is warmth, sunshine, dialogue, friendship, sweet home, and also memory of the past. And now about Alexander Gradnitsky. All Russian people know him very well, and we can see that in the text of Gradnitsky, North is very concrete, documentary, and dynamic, and it is opposed to a generalized image of the mind and home located somewhere in the west or in the south. That is, this homeland is foggy, distant, and incorrect. North is boundless, just like sea, and the sea and the image of the sea and image of the north of Alexander Gradnitsky are very similar. In his poem, it is the motif of the way, overcoming of infinite spaces is constantly present. The aim of this way is not clear, and returning home is meaningless because nobody waits lyrical hero in the south. His life is a constant pilgrimage, which does not want to get rid to any way, to return to region of everyday life, everyday laugh, everyday soup. Also, this is a poem of several words of Alexander Dulov that's very similar, like a decade, 2 decades, there is no bottom to it, render trail, bear trails, wind along the river, or something. Also, this is a picture of the north. And also Gradnitsky stress the difference between north and south, and as something that is a little bit sad, the foggy west and felt it very far away west. Don't lie, brother, about the lost south, and so on. At the same time, the space of Grodnitsky is associated with time, and the past of the North is the sad memory of the Stalinist camp, which has a heavy burden on the shoulder of his hero. His future is also sad. I will not live until spring, until the sheep. As a result, the moment here and now seems to be crucified on the cross of space-time, north-south and past-future. And the significance of this present moment is not local and momentary experience becomes a life principle. There are somewhere exception over the tundra. It's very close, this poem of Grodnitsky is very close to indigenous poem, but still there is no direct dialogue between nature and author. Yes, the word is a random festival and wisely. While I can see every day the shade of the cloud flying over the tundra, the shade of the bird flying over the tundra, and the shade of the reindeer that runs along the tundra, and next to them my own shadow. The next is Oleg Kuvayev, and Oleg Kuvayev calls the North that another planet, which is incomprehensible for many people. You will constantly feel that something important is passing by you. Perhaps this is important and narrow strip of lemon color that separate gloomy sky from the horizon. And your heart will suddenly sink, and you will think for no reason that you have not lived as it should until now. In contrast of Grodnitsky, Kuvayev stresses the struggle with nature. You can see this is the text about this moment, and the principle of Dalstroy, that is Northern construction company, do or die. And by we manage it, guys, goodbye we do. And why were not you in that tractor-drawn sledge? Where have you been and what have you been doing all this year? And just comparing image of the North, we can see that both authors sincerely love the North, but for indigenous it's close and obvious. Nature directly, almost forcibly affect a person, affect him with his joy, or in contrary with his himself. But paradoxically, that the perception of nature of a space without end and age has turned out to be characteristic not for the nomadic people of the North, but for non-indigenous settling civilization who arrived there. And several slides without comments which show the clash of these two images. You can see this. It's a Victor Temnevia picture. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Konstantin, for your presentation. And now we have the final paper, final presentation by Vladimir Davydov, Changing State, Environment and Exploration of the Arctic, New Horizons of Ethnographic Knowledge.
We will move to Taymyr from Chukotka, the northern territories, and I did field work there. I've been there 7 times, and this would be the story about how behind the exhibition, and I will say some stories behind these things. Governing the Arctic implied the scientific exploration of the remote territories and the research of the relatively unknown northern indigenous people. The work of expedition in the far north led to the creation of particular image of the other. During the travel, explorers collected ethnographic objects and took them out of the everyday context in order to put them to museums. In many respects, they try to gather the most exotic and rare items. Therefore, visual representations of indigenous groups in the museum's exposition initiated the process of construction of the other, and this other was kind of backward or primitive, and the researchers' views of the indigenous groups and their beliefs often reflected a political climate within the state policy. The perception of local groups as children of the nature, which can be found in ethnographic accounts of the 19th century, transformed into the paternalistic policy of the state and designed to civilize and care about them. There was a certain contrast between the local people's everyday practices and the tendency to save and preserve the objects in the museum collections. And shamanism was one of the most popular topics to investigate, and the spiritual objects were in the focus of ethnographic work. One of the researchers' tasks of their work was the idea to collect and preserve the objects which were associated with the shamanic cult in the museums. Therefore, the shamanic objects in Kunstkammer are often the examples of things actually employed in the rituals. So indigenous people use particular material objects as mediators in relations with non-human beings. Some of them functioned as containers of spirits, and people communicated with them, and these relations were emotional. Many people continued to use their old spirit protectors in the rituals and feed them during the Soviet period. Even the state started severe campaigns against shamans, which, however, were not successful in some regions, and people managed to maintain the autonomy of their own views. It wasn't an easy task, since conducting shamanic rituals was strictly forbidden. In many places, people continued to perform these rituals in a secret. In some locations, shamans continued performing their rituals, even it could be a reason for persecution. And this was the case of the remote Arctic territories in Taimyr Peninsula. And the biography of a famous Nganasan shaman of the Soviet period, Tubiaku Kasterkin, demonstrates the strength of local spiritual practices and views. He was born in 1921 in the family of the famous shaman Dyukhade. The father and the grandfather of Dyukhade were considered by local people as strong shamans. Nganasans, indigenous people of Taimyr, kept a shamanic succession from generation to generation, and Tubiaku became a shaman similarly to his ancestors. The marks on human body might signify that a person had a shamanic gift. Tubiaku received his name, which means a button, due to a specific birthmark on his left shoulder. Nganasan shamanism is a distinctive phenomenon which is slightly different from the neighboring groups, and Nganasans were almost not Christianized during the 19th century. Their shamans didn't divide into categories, that is typical for the neighboring people, Nenets. One of the main of their functions was to facilitate hunting luck. Shamans were able to communicate with so-named Koika idols, Nganasans called them Koika, which were also responsible for luck and well-being. Ganasan shamanic rituals were always collective actions where a large number of people participated. And Kosterkin shamanic practices became a reason for his imprisonment during the Stalin's rule. He was released in 1950s, however, did not change his views and continued performing shamanic rituals. It's known that he lived near the Avam River in a fishing and hunting camp, refusing to stay in the settlements and be a member of local kolkhoz. At the same time, he actively collaborated with scientists and donated some of his objects to museums, and we received some objects to Kunstkamera. And Tubiako had a great authority among local people, and he was a great performer of the Nganasan epos. He collaborated with many ethnographers and folklorists, and one of them was Galina Nikolaevna Gracheva, working in a pair with an archaeologist Leonid Khlobystin during the Polar exhibition for Archaeological Institute in the 1970s, and they brought a lot of different objects to Kunstkamera at that time and collected two famous old shamanic wooden koika faces. Here you can see the slide. Meeting the researchers at the fishing camp at Ugarne River near the river Dudipta in 1971, Tubiako sold the researchers his shamanic costume. And they registered it afterwards in the Kunstkamera's collections. The shaman, however, cut all the metal plates depicting his protector spirits, and they remained with him. Metal plates are the integral part of shamanic costume. Each of them has an important role in shamanic performance, and they serve as tools and protectors during the trips between the upper, middle, and underground worlds. Some of them were made in the form of animals and birds that help to increase the vision and ability of action for the human. According to Nganasans, each material object may maintain a hidden connection with a particular person and has a kind of feedback with him. So the tool itself helps a human to produce something because it has an internal intentionality. So Tubiako explained Galina Gracheva that a shaman needs a complete costume with supplementary pendants as a sledge. So this is a means of transportation. According to him, in order to move large distances, one should not forget anything. In this sense, the costume was employed by a shaman as an equipped vehicle. The costume itself had the internal intentionality. It knew the shamanic road and could orient within the space between different worlds. Tubiako's costume is, in its current condition, represents Nganasan's worldview and expresses the idea that local people continue to believe in spirits. In order to commemorate this fact, the shaman himself destroyed the fullness of this item. This was a powerful sign. It shows that the spirit's protectors still maintain their power and they are connected with the costume, even though they are absent. This costume had been used in the rituals and can be seen as a complete set on some photographs and videos made by various researchers. One part of this costume was painted by red, second part by black color, and some animals, such as a moving bear on this costume. And this object demonstrates the difference in indigenous views and external ideology. The researchers and museum workers intended to save the existing artifacts of the indigenous culture. Kosterkin costume, however, as an incomplete item, promoted the idea that indigenous minorities had their own worldview, which still existed. The absence of the metal plates, shaman's helpers on the coast showed that they are still in use and people believe in their force. Tubiako inherited the iron and copper plates after the death of his father as a middle son. They served as mediators in communication with the spirits, and the shaman refused giving them to the museum. According to Nganasan tradition, they should be given to the inheritor of the shamanic gift. And Gracheva managed to establish good relations with Kosterkin and the members of his family, and periodically visited them during expeditions to Taimyr. Later on, in 1976, the shaman sold Gracheva his drum, and here you can see his family, and this is his drum. And he used this drum in a ritual practice. And this was his family drum, which could be used in a tomb or mobile dwelling on sledges. A shaman could use it in rituals wearing a costume without pendants or even without a special costume. Kosterkin employed 2 drums in his practice, and he agreed to sell only one of them to the museum. In perception of the shaman, a drum was a live being. It helped him to communicate with the spirits and travel between the worlds. And Balaku, who was the wife of Tubiaku, helped him making the rituals. In 1971, Gracheva and her colleague Labystin made the photos of the shamanic performance Tubiaku did with the assistance of his wife. The researchers were allowed to take pictures only after the first part of the ritual dedicated to calling of the spirits. The assistant played an important role in the rituals and the communication with spirits. After the death of his wife, Kosterkin stopped doing public performances and sold some of his ritual objects to museums. He continued doing rituals only occasionally for the members of his family until his death in the accident in December 1989. Through the biography of Kosterkin, we can see how indigenous people maintain their views in the context of building, continuation and decline of the Soviet project, working out their skills to acclimatize both political and ecological changes. The administrative decisions transformed local people's relations with the landscape with the introduction of new technologies, of mobility, use of space and dwelling. At the same time, the changes were supplemented by creativity of local people. Recent decades can be characterized by the indigenous culture revitalization process initiated by the change in socio-economic environment. In many regions, people started to reconstruct forgotten, lost elements of their culture. These initiatives became a reason for creative synthesis. The new forms became invented. In this sense, revitalization serves as a way to create something novel. Some of the initiatives got support from the state that helps to create local cultural centers, museums, as well as to organize festivals and public events. Therefore, the state shouldn't be seen as a kind of concrete and homogeneous space. It's always in the process of building and rebuilding. Both natural environment and the state are unstable rather than existing in a condition of equilibrium. In other words, they change together. However, the practice is based on ideology change the life of indigenous communities, and people have to adapt to various innovations. Northern indigenous culture should not be approached as something rigid or frozen or timeless, but they should show the ability to adapt to numerous innovations and initiatives. Therefore, the Arctic should not be seen just as a territory of experiments carried out by the external forces. It's also a space of a creative synthesis and inventions made by local people, where they themselves might maintain their relations with the environment and adapt to numerous changes. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, for presenting. So we are open for discussion.